Welcome. My name's Taylor Riley. I'm a mortgage consultant here at the credit union. It is 11 o'clock. I am very excited to be going through this webinar with you. I've been thinking about doing this webinar for over a year, so it's nice to finally be here today to be able to do that. We're going to wait just another minute or so to see if anybody else trickles in, because we've had 3 or 4 people in the last 15 or 20 seconds. We're going to be talking about accessory dwelling units, not auxiliary dwelling units. I literally thought they were called auxiliary dwelling units. And then when I read that, I was like, that auxiliary doesn't even make sense. So accessory dwelling units, we're going to be talking about them. We've got some slides here, quite a bit of information to be able to go through. And as always, afterwards, I'm going to be giving you my contact information, so that you can be able to give me a call or one of the mortgage consultants a call here, and we can be able to discuss your options with you. We're going to do an overview of accessory dwelling units. We're going to talk about what they are, how they can be able to help, some ins and outs of them, give you some statistics, what kind of loan options are available. But the most important thing in real estate is to have a conversation with a professional who can be able to take down your information of what you're trying to accomplish and use deductive reasoning to find which option is going to be best for you. Not every loan option we have is beneficial. Not every loan option we have is beneficial for every member, is what I'm trying to say. So we just want to make sure that we find the right product for you. We need to take into account time, closing costs, rate, how much equity you have in your home, and everything like that. So we'll go through all of this stuff and we'll get started. What is an accessory dwelling unit? The Salt Lake City Planning Division states an accessory dwelling unit, or an acronym ADU, is a complete secondary residential unit that can be added to a property. ADUs can be attached to or part of the main building or be detached. And we'll talk about the difference between attached and detached a little bit later, as a separate building in a backyard or garage conversion. An ADU provides completely separate living space, including a kitchen, bathroom, and its own entryway. The biggest thing that I have learned in the last 10 years when I've been doing this is that individuals that try to cheap out or go cheap on trying to do these projects run into a lot of problems. So you don't want to go cheap. Some of the things that we've seen is that people will separate space with a deadbolt door. They may turn a garage into a quote unquote ADU, and they'll just leave a deadbolt door in between. Here are the benefit of doing that. You save money and you can be able to start to get income. The problem is that you're not up to code and your property is non-conforming. And when the property is non-conforming, when you go to sell it, you can be able to run into problems. And if it's non-conforming, you will run into problems with being able to sell that to somebody who needs to get a loan. And the difficulty that we have now compared to one in the past is that when I started doing this primarily 10 years ago, if somebody called and said, I want to buy a duplex, it's in South Salt Lake, kind of in a little bit of a rundown area. They're selling it for $190,000. I'd like to pay cash for that property. That's something that not everybody could have been able to do, but you had a handful of people that could be able to do that. When you these properties that are now costing $400,000, $500,000, $700,000, it's going to be extremely difficult to find a buyer who is going to be able to have that sort of cash on hand. Almost everybody is getting a loan to when they purchase a home. I know everybody gets a cash offer, but that money is coming from some sort of other lending avenue, in my opinion. There are people that do have the cash, but you're really shrinking your pool if you do this on the cheap and become a non-conforming property. So there are things that are going to cost money that you might need to do, a separate meter for gas and water. It's good to take time to look through the plans, talk to the proper people that you need to, and we'll go into all of this so that you can be able to put this into a good position for you now and in the future for when you want to make decisions for you and your loved ones. If you do this, do it right, it's going to benefit you the most. Okay? All right, so that's what an accessory dwelling unit is. So we're going to be talking about the ins and outs of that. There is a question box. If you have any questions, please list them. I've got James here who's helping me out. He will ask the question. So anytime a question pops up, type it up. We will answer it if it fits within what we're talking about. If we need to answer it after the slide that we're on, we can be able to do that. We want to answer questions for you so that we can be able to further the conversation. 2 or 3 people may have the same question, so put that question in. We'll address it. If there's a follow-up question somebody has to the question that was asked, please put that in there and we'll address that as well. Okay. All right, what qualifies as an ADU from a lending perspective? So there's 2 things. There's the ADU that the city or the county says, and the county and city could say different things. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. You do want to talk to your municipality about what the rules are, because just because Salt Lake County says this is what you can do doesn't mean that the city says this is what you can do. And then there's the lending perspective. So when we're looking at this from a lending perspective, an ADU commonly refers to an accessory apartment or an in-law suite. It's smaller than the additional living, or it is a smaller additional living space on the same lot as a single family home. It must include space for living, sleeping, cooking, and bathrooms independent from the primary residence. That doesn't mean that it needs to be detached, because we'll talk about the difference between an attached ADU and a detached ADU, but it does need to be independent. While the ADU may or may not include access to the primary residence, it must be accessible without going through the primary residence. So that's what we're talking about. You cannot be able to get to the ADU through the primary residence, as in with a double deadbolt. It has to have its own entrance on the outside. It must be accessible without going through the primary residence, and there must be some expectations of privacy from the home. So the best way that I can be able to look at this when I talk to people, and how I correlate this, a lot of times people will start a project on their home, and this has happened a lot recently, unfortunately, is that they'll get a home equity line of credit and they will borrow $150,000. And what happens is that they run out of money halfway through their project, or 80% of the way through their project. They'll call us and say, hey, I need to borrow additional money. That can be problematic for us because the home is not in a sellable condition. So the thought process that I have, if somebody that you didn't know were to walk into the home, would they be willing to buy it in its current conditions without concerns of how somebody set up the home or what's going on in the home? And that's the thought process that I have with these ADUs. You don't want a situation where somebody is looking at a door and they're saying, what's on the other side of that? And they're like, oh, that's where the rental is. That's going to cause some trepidation for people, and that would not allow us to classify that as an ADU. All right, any questions on that? It doesn't look like it. Okay. A lot of time, especially right now, and it has been for as long as I've been in this game, and I'm sure other people as well, are you nervous about buying an investment property? So ADUs are a fantastic investment for homeowners that are looking to just kind of dabble into real estate. A lot of times people are concerned with taking on the additional stress of having a different structure. How far away is it? What's going to happen with it? Everybody's heard horror stories of people who have turned a home into a rental and had problems with it. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you had a bad renter initially. I have a friend right now that's going through a situation where he had a renter for 12 years in his home. Sometime around COVID, his renter just went cuckoo. And so he was in that home for 8 years before he became a problem and became a hoarder. Situation just kind of changed, and it's caused them quite a bit of heartache to be able to get that renter out and get a new renter in, and quite a bit of money. With an ADU, it's right next to your home. It allows you to have a little bit more oversight with what's going on in the property. It's just a different feel from anybody that has an ADU to investment property. If you have an opportunity to talk to somebody who has investment property and has an ADU, there's just a massively different feel with an ADU than an investment property. Can be positive, can be negative. Some people like the detachment where they don't have to see that person every day. So it's just massively different than having a property that's across town. If you're looking for a long-term investment, You can build an accessory dwelling unit. Not only do they add immense value for you, but they provide great passive income. So the value of the home is going to increase some, and you are going to be able to get some value on that. So buying an investment property, as I said, can be expensive. The cash down, the maintenance, wondering what's going on, having trash properties, who's living there. Just this allows you to have a little bit more comfort in what you're looking for. And also it can be able to help with family members, as we'll talk about some soft landings a little bit and how you can be able to help people out without infringing on your personal space that you have. So we'll talk about that a little bit later in the webinar. All right, why build an ADU? There are 4 reasons up on the board that you can be able to, why you would want to look at an ADU. So we want to, first thing, increase property value. Now, all ADUs are not created equal. There is, as I said, an attached and a detached ADU. If you build an ADU that is attached to your home, you're going to have different value than if you were to build a garage and put an ADU on top of it. The square footage of that home, the curb appeal of that home, all of those things will kind of come into place when looking at the value of your home. I'll talk about this a little bit later, but I'll mention it right now. I highly recommend that you talk to a plethora of professionals if this is something that you are planning on doing. One of those would be talking to a real estate agent about your particular area and what kind of ADU would be allowed after talking to the city that would allow you to increase your value the most. If you have 3 different options to build an ADU, one of them is going to cost 80, the other one's going to cost 100,000, another one's going to cost 110. The next thing that I would want to know is that how much am I going to be able to rent that out for, and how much value am I going to be able to receive in resale value of this home? Those are all things that you want to take into account when you're looking at this. So you'd want to talk to a real estate agent, you'd want to talk to an appraiser, and have a conversation with them and just talk to them and ask them what their feeling is, what's becoming the norm, what do we see moving forward. And when I say what's becoming the norm, those are all things that we need to take into account. Solar panels, you were getting a value of about 5 to 10% ROI on your solar panels when they first started to become a big thing. And so now we're seeing people that are getting 15 to 20% of the value of those because they are becoming more common. Those are all things that need to be taken into account and what needs to be thought about when you're thinking about this long term of what you're wanting to do. Also, the house, friends, and family. We all know housing is becoming extremely expensive. I'll give you some stats on this in a little bit, but this allows you to be able to have multiple families live on one piece of land in the city, but they each have their own private areas. So this can be a very, very good soft landing spot for that. This can generate income in the short term and in the long term. You can be able to make the decision on if you want to do a short-term rental or if you'd like to do long-term rental. Short-term, typically people think of Airbnb. Long-term rentals could be somebody who's signing a year lease. If you are in an area that is close to a campus, you may be doing 6-month or 9-month leases with people coming in at the beginning of the school year and leaving. These are all things that you can be able to take into account with an ADU because it's not traditional living. The other thing is, and some people do care about this, is that it adds housing stock. Salt Lake County and Salt Lake City specifically have added a lot of amenities and abilities to be able to do this. They are very pro ADU, looking for a way to be able to take your property and turn it into have a second housing on it. At the same time, the beautification of a property, they want to keep that. So there's a lot of things that they have in place to be able to help the neighborhood keep its integrity, but also add housing to it. Okay, what kind of ADUs are there? So we've got the attached and we have the detached. Just want to make sure I got my notes here properly. Okay, there's attached and detached. We've got attached, existing space conversion, basement conversion. People may think of this as a mother-in-law apartment, a basement apartment, main building with an attached garage. You can be able to turn your attached garage into an ADU. Addition to main building exterior. Some people will build on to their primary residence without adding any increased square footage for your home, but to add the ADU, that's what's going to be an attached ADU. An attached ADU can be a little bit cheaper because you have existing walls. With a garage, you have 3 of 4 walls. There's some ways that you can be able to save on some cost by doing an attached ADU. So that's something to be able to take a look at with that. Attached ADU, this is where talking to a real estate professional could be able to help immensely. You may not get as big of a rate of return on an attached ADU as you would on a detached ADU. And the reason is because when somebody's buying the home, they don't want to share a living quarters. So that's something to be able to take a look at when you have that, of what somebody would want long term. Those are conversations you can have with multiple real estate professionals of what they think, what they're seeing, homes that have been sold, so that they can be able to advise you on the decision that you're going to make. Okay, we've got a detached ADU. So what the detached ADU is it's a detached unit, something that's being built in the backyard or a side yard or somewhere in the yard. Detached garage conversion. If you have a detached garage, which is not as common here in Utah, but if you have a detached garage, you can convert that into an ADU. What's more common is that people will build a detached garage and put an ADU above the garage. That's a really good way to be able to get the garage space that you're looking for, but also add some value to the property by putting that ADU above that. And then attached existing garage. I don't know why we put that over there. I'm trying to think. I know I sent that over to you. I don't know why that's there. So we'll skip that one. But there's some different rules that are in place for this sort of thing. Now, one of the things that you need to take a look at, just like with anything, finishes, size, where is the space, parking, privacy, all of these things will affect the value that you have on your home. Now, parking is one thing that you need to take into account. A lot of times people will think, I want to do an ADU, but they don't think about the parking aspect. If you add one parking spot, which may be required for code, I'll talk about that a little bit later with the conversation I had with the city about that. But most of them require that you have to have a parking spot for the ADU that you're building. If you build a spot that has 2 parking, or a unit that has 2 parking spots, you're going to get a tremendous amount more value, because now you can be able to have not just one person, but 2 people move into a space. Could be a married couple. These people are going to be willing to pay more in rent if there's 2 spaces to be able to park their cars. An additional thing is that your neighbors are probably not going to hate you because you're not having multiple cars being parked in the street. So those are some things that are going to be important when you're looking at this, on how much value you can be able to gain with an attached to detached. Okay, so we got a couple questions. James, you want to read that one for me?
Yeah, so if detached, is there a separate address assigned to that residence, and how is that address addressed via code? That's from Sonua.
I don't know the answer to that question. Here in Utah, my personal, just from what I've gone through in seeing, not going to have. If you one piece of land, it's not a separate address. Now, the city or the post office may put an A or a B or a back unit. I've seen a lot of different things with people who have lived in different apartments and stuff like that. So I don't necessarily know the answer to that. However, if you're not splitting the lot because you're not selling it, there's not going to be 2 separate addresses like it would if you were to build a home behind your current home and then give them an easement to be able to use your driveway to go back to that. That would have a separate lot. That would have a separate address.
Let's see, these are from Katie. I think Katie's in our mortgage team. She's saying existing detached garage you can attach onto it to build an ADU. I think that's the last one. That's that one we were talking about. And then if you don't give a separate address for it, I don't think. That's what Katie's telling us. Okay.
Okay, any other questions on that? All right, we'll move on to the next slide. Okay, how does an ADU benefit me? We'll have higher resale value, passive income, a soft landing spot for children, grandchildren, to be able to help them with that. We do have one more question real quick.
Robert. He says, one comment, short-term rentals are commonly prohibited in municipalities that have incorporated ADUs in their code.
I agree with that. And that's where you want to talk to them about what rules are available with that sort of thing. All of them have different rules and regulations that you can choose to follow, but that's where you'll talk to the municipalities about what's allowed and what's not allowed to be able to go through with your ADU. All right, so an ADU, how does it benefit me? It's going to increase your resale value. There's also passive income that can be able to come. The average rent for a one-bedroom apartment in Salt Lake City for the year, $14,203. The benefit also of moving forward with an ADU faster than waiting down the road is that you're going to have more time in your lifetime as an owner of the home to receive that rent and have that income coming in. So not to say, hey, you need to do this as soon as possible, but that's something to be able to take a look at. Do I want to do this now? Do I want to do this in the future? That's income that you could be generating right now. Also, as I've talked about, a soft landing space for a child or grandchild when they reach that point in their life. Let's see. Slide 5. Let's go back one. Okay, so I had an opportunity to contact the city and ask them how you can be able, what are the steps that you can be able to go through to be able to have an ADU set up. And there are a lot of guidelines that they have, but the city, as I said, it really wants people to be able to do this. So they have something that's called a development review meeting, where you can be able to request a meeting. There'll be a list of items that they need, and you'll sit down at that meeting at that time. So let's say we'll do this on Thursday at 2 o'clock. You go in, there's multiple people from different departments to be able to go through and help you walk through the steps to make sure that you're following within guidelines that the city has for you. And so they'll schedule that. They'll have that list of items. They'll go through, if I want to do this, what would be, if I wanted to do a detached garage, what would be this? If I want to do attached, what would be this? Those are the things that they can be able to kind of help you with your plans and everything like that to be able to go through. Also, I talked about parking. If you live within a quarter mile of a transit stop and a half a mile of a bike lane, you can be able to build an ADU and not have a parking spot available for them. So there are different websites that you can be able to go to see if you can be able to fit within that. When I was talking to the gentleman at the city, I started to think, like, I would think that most people would be within a quarter mile and within a half a mile of bike lane. He said that it is very common for people to be that close, but they have maps set up for you. The city wants these. They want to be able to help you with it so that you can be able to build that. One of the other things that when you're looking at doing this, your lot and a current garage or something may determine what you can and cannot be able to do. So you can only cover 50% of your land with buildings on an individual piece of property. So when you're going through and building, you may want to build X, but you may not have enough land to be able to do that. So you may need to put some of that on top of a current home and not take as much ground space up. They'll walk you through all that stuff so they can be able to help you. They've got lots of resources. We're going to follow up with an email that's got some resources available for you. But call the city, call the county to be able to go through this stuff with you. They really, really want to help people be able to do this.
All right, Tanua has a question. Are there restrictions in a historical district, i.e. University Historical District?
I'm sure that there are, and that's where the city can be able to talk to you about what you can and cannot be able to do in certain areas. I know Murray City passed some ordinance probably about 15 years ago now that new homes could only be so high. They wanted the homes to be able to fit within the look of the area. They didn't want people to buy these massive plots of land that were available around Avalon in that area, if you're familiar with Murray, and then build these massive homes. And so there are rules that they've set up to be able to help with that sort of thing. The city will go through all that stuff with you. If you cannot build what you want to, they'll talk to you about what you can be able to build so that you can be able to get this. Once again, they want these types of homes available to help with the housing shortage that we have.
All They couldn't hear me before. Now they can.
Oh, there we go.
So I got to speak up.
Okay. Well, I can just read the questions as well. Okay. Next slide. All right. What are my lending options? This is where a conversation with the mortgage consultant is going to be important. So a lot of times when people are thinking that they're going to be building a home, they are going to need a construction loan. That's the first thing. I'm constructing something, so I need a construction home or a construction loan. Construction loans can be a great product, but we want to go through your individual situation and see what is going to be the best product for you. Here are the downside to a construction loan. They typically have a little bit of a higher fees, and there's more red tape associated with them. However, the benefit of a construction loan is that they allow you to borrow off of the future value of the home. So you're not just using what your current value is, you're using what the value is going to be when your project is completed. It really steps you into a different stratosphere on what lending options might be available or dollar amount for your project might be available. So when we're going through this, we want to talk to you about what your plans are and what you're trying to accomplish. Are you going to be doing some of the build on your own? Are you going to be hiring a contractor? Are you somebody who is in the trade but don't have your general contracting license? All of these things can be able to allow us to know which option to be able to go with. We do have second mortgage options. The benefit of a second mortgage is that they typically don't have any fees associated with them. 99% of them won't have fees associated with them. So when we're going through with a fixed rate second mortgage, if you have the equity available, this could be a really, really good option to be able to take a look at. Fixed mortgages, second mortgages will have a little bit of a shorter term, so sometimes the increased payment can be prohibitive to people. That's where we can possibly look at a cash out refinance on a home. Now, a lot of times people will be like, well, why would I want to do a cash out refinance on my home? I've got a 2.5% interest rate. Well, that's where a second mortgage can be very, very beneficial because it doesn't touch your first mortgage. We'll run a lot of numbers and talk to you about what option is going to be best. What is the payment that you're looking for between your first and second mortgage? All of these things can be able to help us decide which option is going to be best for you. Now, there's some times where you're saying, I want to do X, but the numbers just don't match up with X, and that'll happen. But we can be able to talk about everything that we can be able to do for you. Go through all of your options. No two scenarios are the same. That's why a professional from a lending perspective is going to be vital to be able to go through all of your options to be able to help you with that. All right.
Sarah asks, what is the average cost of an ADU?
I don't know the answer to that because there's a ton of things that go into that. As I said, if you just were to take your current garage and turn it into an ADU, I think that's going to be substantially cheaper than if you're building a new structure. Building a new structure is going to be more expensive than an existing structure because you're building multiple walls. Now, depending on where you're at, sometimes pitches of roofs and stuff like that can be difficult. That's why it's important to be able to talk to somebody about what you can and cannot be able to do. I'm sure the internet has some ideas for you on what costs could be able to be there. I've had conversations with people, just quick conversations. We're going to send out an email with an individual that you can be able to talk to and ask some questions to on this. They are expensive, though. It's not cheap to be able to do this sort of things. You're thinking about long-term return on investment. You're going to have an increased value on your home. You're going to be receiving the rent. If you think that you're going to be able to, I can build this for $30,000, $40,000, that might be a little bit difficult for you to be able to do, but not impossible. So you just need to talk to the professionals to be able to find out what you want to do, what you can do, so that you can be able to know what options you have available for you.
If the home is paid for, is HELOC and or construction loans the lending option?
It can be a very, very good option. A home equity line of credit, we'd want to talk to you about what options you'd have available. Sometimes the home equity line of credit is not the best program for this. That's where you'd want to talk to somebody and find out if we can. If the home's paid off, you've got a lot of equity in the home. You may not need to use the future value of the home. The current value of the home may be sufficient. And if that's the case, then what we can be able to do is we can look at those lending options that are going to be lower in closing costs.
Do you have an idea of today's second mortgage loan rate?
I do have an idea of those. So you're going to be, if you have optimal credit, you're going to be somewhere in the mid 7% range. 1% higher than what we're seeing on 30-year mortgages. So 30-year mortgages have been down a little bit. If we were to have this conversation a month ago, they were within 0.5% of one another. So we want to take a look at that situation and find out what's going to be best for you. There's two things that I take a look at personally when I'm going through is a cash out refinance or a second mortgage going to be best for you. I want to take into account how much interest you're paying now and how much interest you'd pay on the future, and then look at payments. If I have a conversation with somebody and I ask them, what's the maximum payment that you would want on a loan? And you say, I don't want my payments to exceed $2,500. If you're currently paying $1,500 on your current mortgage, and we look at a second mortgage and the payment's going to be $1,800, we're a little bit over what you're trying to accomplish. So I like to ask the questions, and then when I run the numbers, sometimes I'll have a conversation with somebody and they'll say, well, I could stretch a little bit to that. The other thing is, since we're doing a second mortgage, sometimes people have other debts that we can be able to absorb into that. So I had a situation like this recently where somebody had about $14,000 in credit card debt. Their payments were quite high for that, about $500 a month. So all of a sudden I said, well, let's look at doing the second mortgage. We have the equity. Let's absorb this $14,000. The rate's going to be substantially better. Now we have an additional $500 that we can be able to play with. And to be able to cover that payment was only about $90, $95. So all of a sudden we had $405 in a monthly budget they weren't anticipating. We can be able to take a look at all of that and make sure that we're putting you in the best financial position to be able to succeed and accomplish your goals.
Does the lender look at the projected income from the ADU when approving the loan?
There are different lending guidelines that we can be able to take a look at with different products. So I don't want to say yes or no to that sort of answer. There's a lot of different products that we need to take a look at to find out what's going to be best for you. That's the best answer that I can be able to give with that sort of thing. So we want to see what sort of loan products that we have available for your specific situation, so that we can be able to find out what we can and cannot be able to do. The last thing that we want to do is be able to say, yes, we can be able to do this, we're planning on that, and then we run into a problem. That's where you conceptually in your mind draw out a plan. This is what I'm trying to do. Then we want to talk to a mortgage consultant about what's available for us. And if the finances look good, then we can be able to take the next steps of being able to draw up some plans, do some research with the city, talk to a builder, and go on from there. Okay, how do I know which is right for me? We just need to have a conversation with people. How do I know which ADU is right for me? Well, there's a lot of things that we can be able to look at. So when I was looking through my research, what's the benefits and the value of this, and each different type of ADU, I talked about the soft landing a little bit, and I got some statistics I want to go over with you on this. So college versus housing. I've been reading or watching a lot of YouTube podcasts where people have talked about they would recommend stop investing in a 529. If you're not familiar with the 529, you can be able to invest into this tax-free for state colleges. Each state has a 529, I believe. I know Arizona does, and I know Utah does, but I believe most states have those. And you need to stop investing into that and start investing into a house for your children for their future, because the cost of housing is only going to be able to increase. And that's true. When we look at decade by decade, what was the most important thing that people were paying for? In the past, it was food. 40% of people's income in the 1920s was used towards food. It was 30% in the 1950s. It's only 12% today, which was shocking to me. So only 12% of our income is being used for food. So I know that housing is more expensive, but there are things that have become less expensive. But also, the big thing with housing, a lot of times I've heard this since I've been in lending for 20 years. I can be able to buy a home for just as much as I can be able to rent a home for. That's not necessarily what I'm seeing that's true today in 2024. However, it has been true in the past. But the big thing that you have is that when I look at the long-term cost of what somebody is spending on their percentage of income, the variables start to change. So a person under 30 that's renting, that we've got 42% of people in this country that spend 50% or more of their income on rent. So under the age of 30, and they're spending 42% are spending 50% or more of their income on that. When we look at a homeowner, when they initially purchase a home, they're typically around 30%. However, after 5 years, they're only spending 21% of their income on housing. So it fixes your costs and what you can be able to do. Where the ADU can become a soft landing for people is it can become a kind of a graduation thing. My kids can be able to move from the home into the ADU and move out. There's a lot of reasons why people look at this sort of thing. It's not just an income thing. It can really be a generational thing to be able to help families. And that soft landing can be a key to survival. So there's a lot of different reasons why the city's looking to do things. This is one of them, to be able to help people and kind of change the model that we have. And also here in Utah, we decided to stop moving away. Throughout history, you have moved to different places. It's been cheaper to live. We kind of stopped doing that in the 80s, and everybody just wants to continue to stay here. Housing has become very expensive. This is a way where we can be able to continue to stay here and be able to help people out. All right, a couple questions. What about utility connection costs? What are you saying? I honestly don't have any costs on any of this stuff. I have gone through this on my own home, and I did it about 5 years ago on how much it was going to be to build. Utility was something that is something to be able to take a look at. Each home is a little bit different. I'm on a hill where my home is, and one thing I didn't even take into account is that my utilities are buried to the proper depth. However, because I'm on a hill, if we were looking at building something with a basement, the utilities would have to be moved because then all of a sudden it's not deep enough or something like that. So those are all things that you want to take a look at. So I know what my plan was on my property is not going to work at that time because of what I was looking to build. So in the future, when I do build an ADU, it's going to have to be a little bit different. Those are all things that you can be able to you need to take into account. A builder will help you take that stuff into account. The other thing is that most people don't know this. If you spend some time writing out a list of questions and call the utility company or call the planning division for the city, somebody will sit down or somebody will have a conversation with you and talk to you about this stuff. They have these conversations with people all the time. They are professionals in what they're doing for the most part, and they can be able to answer these questions. And one question I always like to ask somebody when I'm investigating something that I don't know anything about, is there any questions that I should be asking you that I'm not? And I think that's a really good question to be able to ask people, because then they can be able to not just answer your questions, but then have you thought about X? Have you thought about Y? Those are all things that are important to think about. All right. Is it best to secure a loan and then start planning, or does the plan need to be put in place to qualify for the loan? It's a great question. I would conceptually come up with a plan. Then what you can be able to do is talk about financing options. You can be able to look online. I would like to build a 600 square foot ADU that is over my garage, or build an additional garage. How much is that going to cost? You can kind of look online and see what the estimates are online. Then we can be able to talk about the financing aspect of it. It doesn't take long to have a conversation with somebody, 15, 20, 30 minutes to be able to go through everything. And then you can be able to say, okay, I feel comfortable having a payment of X per month, which would allow me to borrow Y. That's when I could be able to have a conversation with a contractor and say, hey, I'm thinking about building this. I would like to get some estimates on what this would cost to build. If you'd like to talk to the contractor prior to and have a question or have a conversation with them, you can be able to go that route. But I think it's good to know what the lending options are, because if you're thinking I can afford $800 a month to be able to do this, and it only gives you X amount and we're way away from what you can be able to do, it might not be the right time for you. But if you want to have the question or the conversation with questions, call us so that we can be able to do that. All right, would seem the opposite would be true if accessible could be cost-effective option for aging parents. That's another reason to be able to do it, absolutely. Aging parents, there's a lot of different ways that you can be able to look at this with an ADU on what you want to do. Those are all options that can be very, very beneficial. One thing that we haven't discussed, but a lot of people want to be in their home long term, and maybe they're borrowing the money on the ADU, but they're like, now I'm not going to be able to pay up my home. Those sorts of things with reverse mortgages can be beneficial. There's a lot of lending programs that are available to be able to help people out. So one of the things I love being at the credit union is it gives us instant credibility, because the credit union is not going to give us loan products that are going to put people in bad situations. So we can be able to talk about all of those things the big thing that I like to do is help people with what we're doing now. I don't want to close any doors in the future. So we can be able to look at all of these plans and say, well, this also could be able to help you with this in the future. If needed, we have that available to be able to do. Do certain contractors restrict your ability to receive certain loans? No, the contractor is separate from, well, can you pull that back up? No, that's okay. Possibly. So let me answer that in kind of a long, I'll try and shorten it. But if you are doing a construction project, as we're doing a construction loan, there are certain guidelines that are required with the type of contractor that we're going to approve. So that could answer that question. If you're doing a cash out refinance or a second mortgage where we give you the money, then you could hire any sort of contractor that you want to be able to take care of that. I would highly recommend that you talk to a reputable contractor so that you can be able to put yourself in a very good position. We have people that we've done webinars with in the past that I would recommend that I recommend to people, but it depends on the type of loan that you're doing that could stop you from being able to use certain people. So if you want to have a more detailed conversation with that, give me a call and we can be able to talk about that. All right, does the credit union have a list of contractors or a place to find contractors? We have people that we've worked with in the past, people that are approved for through building through us. We're not, these are people that we've had great experiences with. These are people that we've done loans. They've been contractors on loans. So we do have people that we can be able to use as a tool. Once again, you need to make sure that you do your homework and everything that to make sure that they're licensed and everything like that. These are just people that we've used in the past. Just because we've used them in the past, they were licensed in the past, doesn't mean that they're licensed now. However, if you do a construction loan, we would go through and check all of that stuff. So that's the red tape that's there on the construction loan, is that we do our due diligence. We pull credit on the builder. That is something that I don't know any other financial institution does. So we take extra steps to make sure that that builder's in a good financial position. But as I said, the costs are a little bit more expensive on the construction loan. So we just want to make sure we find the product that works for you. What are you trying to accomplish? Some people don't really have the mentality or the ability to kind of oversee everything. It may cost you a little bit more, but the construction loan is going to be a much better option for you. If you're an alpha type individual who likes control of everything, want to oversee it, and you can be able to do the second mortgage and just do the construction, pay the construction out on your own, and you oversee it, then that might be a better option for you. You just need to know what your capabilities are. All right. My understanding that Salt Lake City has revised the restrictions and guidelines for building ADUs. Do you know where to find that information? I just Googled everything and then I started calling the city. That's how anytime that I'm doing anything, that's what I do. So I like to find some information. There were some wonderful pamphlets online that you could be able to find. I learned things that I didn't even know about while preparing for this. One of the big things is the type of ADUs and how they view them. How much ground you can be able to cover. As I said, the rules are 50%. I didn't know that there was a maximum amount of square footage on an ADU that they have in Salt Lake City. So those are some things that you can be able to take a look at. I would recommend that you hop online, and then I would recommend calling the city. I have lived in a few different cities in my lifetime. My favorite that I lived in dealing with the government was in Murray. I had some problems with a neighbor in two separate situations, and I was able to call the city and have a conversation with them detailing what's going on, and they were wonderful to be able to help. One of them, I was worried about building a playhouse in my backyard, and the city planner just said, hey, I have something I need to go see. I'll run by your home and take a look at that, take some measurements and some pictures and give you a yes or a no on that. Within an hour, I had a text message from him and said, your height is so many feet below what you need to be at. You're good to go. So I feel like government officials are there to be able to help us. We just don't use them as a resource as much as we need to. So they're getting paid. We're paying them with our tax dollars. Use them to be able to help you out. And then also you need to know what the one thing to add to that, you need to know what the rules are today. Just because what the rules were 2 years ago doesn't mean that what they are today. So if you've done some research in the past, you need to make sure that your research is up to date with the rules that they have available for you. Okay, where do I start? A lot of times people will have a question, how do I kind of go through this? First thing that I would do is I'd call a mortgage consultant to discuss my financing options. So I have an idea of what I want to do. This is what I'm looking for. Have a conversation with one of the mortgage consultants. We can be able to go through, talk to you about what your options are. A lot of times when I get done with that conversation, I know I get a very good feeling if this person is done with this idea or if they want to move forward with it to the next step. So that's a good thing to be able to go through, know exactly where your payments are. A big thing right now is that people have a hard time understanding how expensive lending is right now, just because rates are a little bit higher. So we want to have a conversation about what kind of income you have. I run into this a lot of times with people who are not yet taking out Social Security and taking money from their retirement as they need it. We don't really have viable income with how you're structuring your income at this time. So we need to make sure that we're talking about how your income is fitting in with guidelines so that we can be able to make sure that we have lending options available for you. Those are all good things to be able to talk about. Next thing, you want to check with your local municipalities and see what options are available on your property. So we talked about the lending guidelines. You can flip 1 and 2 as well, just with that, whatever you want to do. But you can be able to find out in my city what is available. If you live in a historical district, that's a conversation that you'd want to have. There may be a different department that you need to talk to rather than just the planning zone or the building commission. So you want to make sure that you're talking to who you need to on that. Then you can be able to call a contractor and you can be able to get a bid. I would make sure that you have a detailed conversation to discuss permitting, what's allowed, what's not allowed. If you have any questions, to be able to let them know. You just want to make sure that you're following all the guidelines that you need to so that you don't run into a problem in the future that ends up costing you a lot more money. And then follow up with the credit union mortgage consultant afterwards, after you have all your pieces in place. Because there may be variables that change so that we can be able to make sure that your dream can become a reality. All right, a couple more questions.
It looks like Rob sent a link to some, I can send this link to everyone.
Okay.
Newer regulations.
Yeah, I mean, talk to your local municipality, state, county, just to make sure you're following all the guidelines that we need. Okay. We're going to send a follow-up email to everybody who attended today and everybody who signed up. We're going to put some information on there, some people that you can be able to contact, how you can be able to contact the mortgage consultants, how you can be able to contact contractors and people that we've worked with. So we're detailing that. We have some citations in there. I loved that first one, that Salt Lake City Planning Division. That link right there is wonderful to be able to go to. It was like 26, 27 pages. I read that thing front to back 2 or 3 times. It was absolutely wonderful. And then Fannie Mae, a lot of the underwriting guidelines that we follow here at the credit union are through Fannie Mae. They have some information there. And then also some items on apartments, market trends in Salt Lake and stuff like that so that you can be able to find that. If you have any questions, you can be able to call us. That is the main hotline, 801-481-8840. You can call myself as well. My name's Taylor. My phone number is 801-481-8864. And you can be able to call me if I'm not in my office. It will ring on my cell phone. I'm available till 11 p.m. 7 days a week. So if you have any questions, you want to have a conversation, feel free to reach out to me. If I'm available, I'll answer. If not, you can leave a voicemail and I'll be able to get back to you. You can also text me on my cell phone as well. Give me a call and we can be able to start that conversation.
Dan, if you want to take a screenshot of that real quick, then you can copy those links.
Okay, I appreciate everybody. I appreciate everybody joining us today. This is something that's really, really exciting. If you have any sort of lending questions, if it's not an ADU and you want to turn your basement into something, let's have a conversation about all of that stuff. That could be something that's a lot cheaper. Adding an entrance to the basement could be $10,000, $15,000, and you could be able to turn your basement into something. It doesn't have to necessarily, I talked about with the cheap thing, It doesn't have to be grand and extravagant. You just need to have your eyes open on what's going to happen in the future to be able to take care of everything. But I appreciate your time today. I truly enjoyed doing this. If you need anything, reach out to us, and we'll talk to you soon.